Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we don't concern ourselves with grand battles or the gilded crowns of kings. Instead, we turn inward, to the small, persistent aches of the human body, and the truly desperate ways our ancestors tried to quiet them. This is, as always, a slow, sleepy trip through the strange footnotes of history. A journey for the quiet hours, told without spectacle or surprise, designed to let your mind drift. Before we begin, I am always curious. Where in the world are you joining us from? And what time is it in your corner of the night? Do let me know in the comments below, if you feel so inclined. It's always a pleasure to see who is listening in the dark. Now, find a comfortable position. Dim the lights, perhaps. Let the noise of the day fade into a soft, distant hum. Our journey begins with the most common of ailments, a simple headache. But the cure, you'll find, was anything but simple. In fact, it was rather architectural. The headache you have is not a common one. It doesn't throb behind your eyes in that familiar, almost vulgar way. No, this is something different. It presses. A cold, sharp point just behind your right temple. Steady and insistent. There's a sound to it, you think. A dull, relentless tapping, like that single drop of water falling in a deep stone well. It feels less like an ailment and more like an occupant, a tiny, unwelcome guest, knocking politely on the inside of your skull, asking to be let out, to have a pain so specific, so personal. It feels almost like a privilege, luxurious, in a starving, cold sort of way. This isn't just a sickness. This is a story, waiting for an ending. And so, a savior is summoned. He does not arrive with tinctures or powders, or any of the usual pleasant-smelling remedies. He carries only a small satchel of worn leather, cracked and stained from years of service. He is the local barber surgeon, a man who will cut your hair in the morning, and perhaps a piece of your skull in the afternoon. But it is his smile that truly commands the room. It is wide and calm and entirely too confident for the task ahead. His hands are steady. His eyes are clear. He has the air of an artist, not a healer. And you are his canvas. He sets the leather satchel down on the small wooden table beside you. The sound is soft, but heavy with purpose. He unrolls it slowly, not with the haste of a man fighting a disease, but with the quiet reverence of an artist preparing his canvas. There is no gleam of polished, sterile steel. Instead, the candlelight catches on the dull iron of the tools within. You see the hand drill first. Its wooden handle is dark with sweat and time, the metal auger simple and brutally functional. Next to it, an assortment of pliers and prods lie on the worn leather, their surfaces hinting at rust. They feel out of place, more suited to a carpenter's workshop or a blacksmith's forge than a room of healing. There is no delicacy here, only a cold, unwavering intent. There is no laudanum to dull your senses, no ether to grant you the mercy of unconsciousness. Your only anesthetic is a clay cup filled to the brim with a strong, sour wine. It does not numb the body. It is meant only to soften the edges of the soul. The surgeon leans in close, his voice a low, soothing whisper. He speaks not of pain but of release. He explains that the knocking spirit within your head simply needs a door, a way out. It is a beautiful theory, poetic even. He is offering you a story, a metaphor to hold on to while the iron does its work. You are not a patient undergoing a procedure. You are a haunted house, about to be set free. He places the tip of the drill against your shaven scalp. It is cold. Then the turning begins. It is slow, methodical. The sound is not a sharp, violent noise. It is a dull, grating scrape, a gritty whisper, the sound of stone being ground against stone, of pottery being carved by an unsteady hand. You feel the vibration more than the pain at first. A strange resonance that travels down your spine, through your teeth. This is not surgery, it is a craft. A slow, deliberate act of sculpture, chipping away at the vessel of the soul to create a window. A single perfect opening for the pain to escape. And then, silence. The grinding stops. The surgeon holds up a small circular piece of bone, no bigger than a thumbnail. It is stained a dark crimson. This is not discarded. It is a prize. Your prize. It will be cleaned, polished, and perhaps drilled with a smaller hole, so you can wear it on a leather cord around your neck. A personal relic, a charm to ward off the very same spirits it was meant to release. You did not just lose a piece of yourself. You gained a story to wear. You would think this story always ends in infection, and fever, and a quiet burial. But here lies the most unsettling truth of all. The skull, if the brain beneath is not disturbed, can heal. And often, it did. Archaeologists have found skulls across the world, from ancient Peru to Europe, with the smooth, rounded edges of healed bone around these man-made holes. To survive this ordeal was to be marked as special, chosen, touched by the divine, perhaps. Imagine these men and women walking through their villages with these gentle, permanent divots in their skulls, a visible, undeniable badge of having faced the spirits, and won. It wasn't a scar to be hidden. It was the most peculiar form of celebrity. And so, our story of this strange, architectural cure comes to a close. Today, for a pain that presses from within, we reach for a glass of water and a small white pill, a temporary fix for what we hope is a temporary problem. They sought a different solution, a more permanent one. We look for relief. They built a door, a rather invasive solution, you might think. But not all ancient cures involved changing the architecture of the body from the outside. Sometimes the most sought-after remedies weren't carved from bone, but ground into powder. A medicine made not of herbs, but of history itself. A dusty prescription, borrowed from those who had long since fallen silent. Let us imagine a different ailment. Not a sharp spiritual knocking, but a simple earthly cough. A persistent rasp in your throat that lingers for weeks, heavy and damp. You find yourself in the warm, cluttered shop of an apothecary. The air is thick with the scent of dried herbs, lavender, and something sharp, like vinegar. You explain your ailment expecting a syrup, perhaps, a bitter tea, the usual remedies. The apothecary, a small man with ink-stained fingers and eyes that seem to hold ancient secrets, listens patiently. He nods, but he does not reach for the jars of honey or licorice root. Instead, he turns to you and makes a peculiar promise. He will not offer you a simple cure. He offers you a piece of history, a remedy far older than any herb in his shop. He turns away from the common herbs and walks toward a darker corner of the shop, to a high shelf reserved for his more exclusive remedies. His fingers, stained with ink and time, gently take hold of a dark clay jar. It is sealed not with wax, but with a simple, tight-fitting wooden plug. He places it on the counter before you with a soft, deliberate thud. The sound seems to quiet the room. He removes the plug, and a faint, dry, slightly sweet, and ancient smell fills the air. Inside is a fine, brownish powder, the color of old parchment and dust. This, he says, his voice barely a whisper, is Mummia. You stare at the powder. It looks like cinnamon, perhaps, or some exotic ground root from a faraway land. But this is not a spice from the Silk Road. This is history, ground into dust. The apothecary explains, with the calm demeanor of a man discussing the weather, that this is the powdered remains of the ancient Egyptians. It could be a pharaoh, he says, a queen, or perhaps just a common merchant, or a thief. One can never be entirely sure of the vintage. The resin and bitumen used in their embalming, once meant to preserve them for eternity, are now considered the active ingredients. The question, of course, is why? Why would anyone believe that consuming the dead could possibly bring health? The logic in its own way was quite poetic. It was a form of sympathetic magic. The Egyptians had mastered the art of cheating time. Their bodies resisted decay for thousands of years. Therefore it was reasoned, some of that permanence, that defiance against the natural order, must still linger within their remains. To consume Mummia was not just to take medicine. It was to ingest eternity, one dusty spoonful at a time. To borrow a little bit of a pharaoh's forever. Health wasn't about herbs. It was about absorbing the stubbornness of a soul that refused to disappear. So this powder, this dust of the ancients, what was it for? The simple answer is everything. It was a panacea. A spoonful stirred into wine to soothe a fevered mind. A thick paste mixed with honey to be rubbed upon a swollen bruise. A fine dusting sprinkled directly into an open wound. A bizarre blessing from a ransacked pyramid. It was prescribed for epilepsy, for stomach pains, for coughs, for abscesses. It was the remedy of last resort, and often the first one reached for. A cure for the common cold, and for the inconsolable grief. And because it was so popular, a demand was created. A strange, macabre demand that echoed through the ports of Alexandria and the markets of Europe. Tomb raiding became a profession. But the prize was no longer just gold or jewels. The true treasure was the occupant of the sarcophagus. Crates of the dead, wrapped in linen, were shipped across the Mediterranean like barrels of spice or bolts of silk, their final eternal rest interrupted for the sake of a cough. It was an industry, a supply chain of the sacred, turned into the mundane. But there are only so many pharaohs, and the demand for Mummia was insatiable. So, a dark cottage industry was born. When the supply of ancient, authentic Egyptian dead ran low, local, more recent substitutes were found. Criminals, beggars, the unclaimed dead from plagues. All could be dried, treated with bitumen, and ground into a powder that was, to the undiscerning customer, close enough. Freshness was not a selling point. In fact, it was a liability. Authenticity became questionable. It is easy to imagine this as a relic of the Dark Ages, a foolish superstition left behind with alchemy and serfdom. But the strange truth is that this practice endured. It thrived. Well into the 19th century, a time of steam locomotives, telegraphs, and Charles Dickens, reputable chemists in London and Paris were still selling powdered mummy. One could, in theory, read about a new scientific discovery in the morning paper, and take a dose of a dead pharaoh for a toothache in the afternoon. It was a time of strange and wonderful contradictions. And this brings us back to our own comfortable age. We open a bottle of pills and worry about the list of side effects printed in tiny letters. We fret over allergies and dosages and chemical interactions. They had a different concern, a more metaphysical one. We worry about what the medicine will do to us. They had to worry about what the person in the medicine thought about being consumed. And so our journey for tonight comes to an end. We have drilled a window into a skull and swallowed the dust of a pharaoh. It is strange, isn't it? The things we have done to ourselves, for ourselves. The cures we have carved from bone and borrowed from the dead. All in a desperate, deeply human attempt to quiet the pain, and to live just one day longer. Perhaps it is time now for your own quiet rest. And as you drift away, perhaps consider the strange and winding path history took, just to bring you to the simple comfort of your bed tonight. Sleep well. We'll whisper more next time.